After my sister stole from me, my mother wants to defend her by sending me to military school. This took place when I was 14 years old, approximately 1 year before the divorce of my parents. My younger sister, Pearl, would always spend her allowance as if it were water, particularly on things like makeup, meals from the mall, video games, and clothing from Hot Topic, that she purchased in spite of the fact that I was also given an allowance. My father made me earn it by cleaning the house and working in the yard. My mother never forced Pearl to do any duties with the exception of cleaning her room, and Pearl never did anything she didn't want to do unless her father was present to oversee her. In order to acquire additional funds, I mowed lawns, collected abandoned cans from various locations throughout the area in order to exchange them for a 5-cent deposit, and performed various other odd tasks across the neighborhood. I was putting money down at the time in order to get a scooter so that I could go around town. During the course of 2 years, I was able to save almost $22,000 by working a variety of odd jobs and putting away the majority of my allowance. The accumulation of that money, on the other hand, was not a simple task, primarily because of my sister. Despite the fact that she was aware of all the small hiding places where I used to keep my money, she would steal from them. The following is a memorable passage that I have paraphrased from what I remember. My response: "Hey, sis, did you take my money again?" Pearl: "What? No." When she was caught in the act of lying, she would stutter. "You are a terrible liar," I said. $100 is missing from my savings account. Pearl is saying, "Leave me alone. I didn't do it." She begins to act as if she is crying and then rushes to her mother. Pearl is saying, "Mommy, Kane is picking on me." My response: "She stole from my savings again." "Shut up," my mother yelled at me while snapping her fingers. Is it not obvious that Mama's little girl is feeling upset? That is all there is to it. She said that she did not do it, so it is safe to assume that she did not do it. In that case, I'll put you on the ground if you don't let this go. The other person I know. She did it. And if you don't get the money back, I'll get Dad's help. Mom, there is no longer any requirement for that. Another thing is that you don't have any evidence that she stole your money. Yes, I do, says I. Every single dollar that I add to it is recorded in a ledger that I keep. A total of X was reached 3 days ago. However, at this point, there is only Y. There is a missing $100, and you are aware that she has already stolen from my savings account on multiple occasions. That being said, I am aware that Pearl has already used up all of her stipend for this month, but you still went shopping yesterday. Exactly where did she obtain the money? Don't you think?" Following a brief moment of reflection, my mom scowls. "What do you know, mister? You are firmly planted. I'm going to grab the belt if you do not go to your room," she said. I had the ability to discuss the matter further. However, if there is one thing that I picked up from being in that environment, it was the knowledge of when to stop talking and simply call my father. Therefore, without uttering a single word to either of them, I made my way to my room and slammed the door shut. After that, I reached for my brick-like Nokia cell phone, which I had at the time, and dialed my father's number while he was at work. After he did not pick up the phone, I left a message in which I explained everything. He contacted me back about an hour later and assured me that he will take care of the situation. Not long after that, I heard the ringing of the landline phone in the house, and then I heard my mother yelling at my father as she was on the phone in the kitchen. It was difficult for me to listen from my room, and the only thing I managed to pick up on was my mother trying to excuse her behavior when she was in the wrong. However, that strategy was never successful, and she ended up saying something along the lines of, "Fine. In the event that she did in fact steal the money, you're obligated to repay it because she has already spent it." On the other hand, my mother yelled at me while she threw open my door. "You little snitch. I can't believe you blew the whistle on me. You couldn't just let a little money slip through your fingers after everything I do for you." My response: "So, you admit that my sister took it then?" A sneering mother says, "You know what? It makes no difference to me. More money is required by girls than by boys. There is no reason why you shouldn't just hand it over to her." Simply said, it wasn't even that much. It wasn't just a little money, and you ought to know that, I said. In spite of the fact that she took $100, I would still want it back even if it was only $1. If someone stole from your purse, you would not want it to happen to you. The same thing would happen if my sister stole from me. She is guilty, as you are aware. One way or another, I want that money back. She did nothing while I put great effort into it. Mom, my darling has no responsibilities. She is a princess and ought to be treated accordingly. That isn't what bothers me. She may go be a princess away from my possessions and away from me. That's it, you tiny expletive. I'm going to knock your ass. Me, standing up and staring her eye to eye, as I was already as tall as her at 14 and pretty strong from all the outdoor work I was doing. Go ahead and try it. Since I did nothing wrong, I won't let you. My mother froze in position for a second, then let out a loud roar and swung her arm to try and knock something off my dresser, but she swung too low and struck the dresser itself, which I assumed truly hurt. She was giving me a terrible face as she grasped her hand to try and hold in the agony. Her teeth were snarling. She simply turned around then and left. When she didn't, Wei was to go to her wine fridge and proceed to get drunk. I heard her making a racket, yelling and smashing the wall as she went down the hall, down the stairs into the kitchen, doing her regular routine. When she did, Wei was denied from her bedroom door. My sister was watching me. She glanced at me scared and ran back inside her room, slamming the door. Mom was fast changing. She was harassing the whole for getting away with the horrors she did to me. My dad came home from work a few hours later and marched my sister into my room to see me. She admitted to pilfering from me, then informed me I was not grounded. Pearl refused to even look at me the entire time she was being ordered to apologize, and she did so in the most quiet and squeaky voice at first until my dad regularly told her to speak up till she was almost screaming it. Dad then handed me $100 cash to cover what my sister stole and mentioned she was grounded for a week. The proffered money will show up from her stipend. She began crying and called Dad horrible, then dashed to her room, ignoring all of us. My mother merely sat on the rear patio, intoxicated on her preferred wine. She never apologized to me and even behaved as though the whole incident never took place. My sister still received her next allowance as well, but at that time, my mother gave it to her rather than my dad. On my dad's day off from work a few days later, we visited a nearby retailer where he purchased a combination safe to deposit my money and other little items in. We omitted telling my mother or sister I had it. It was set for a 4-digit code. To the best of memory, I used 4962 back then. After locking the safe and emptying all of my money into it, I stored it at the rear of my closet. A few weeks passed, and one day after returning from mowing some neighbors, I discovered my room had been rifled. To let her know what Pearl did to my room, I gave my mother a call. Mom said, "My baby didn't do this." "Well then, did you?" I said. "Mom, no." "Well, it could only have been one of you. No one else was here, and this room was clean when I left." Mom, clearly upset at getting caught by reason. "Fine, but if she did, then so what? You had it coming from not being kinder to her." Anyhow, she then turned to dash off. I phoned my dad once more and left another note explaining what transpired on his work answering machine. I then went to tell my sister I knew she was the one who tore apart my room. I said she couldn't get to my money anymore since I had locked it up in a safe. Before she could even try to respond to me, she then had an awful fit, and naturally, nasty Mama Bear came running to save her. My sister kept wailing in her room for the next 20 minutes while I reiterated that Pearl couldn't get at my money anymore and returned to clean her room, only thrown and spread around. Nothing was truly missing or ruined. I gathered everything and restored it exactly how it was. Still, it was the most arrogant I had ever felt as I cleaned my room. The next day, though, I discovered it ripped once more, and this time my window was damaged too. Not able to get the safe open, Pearl had thrown it out the window. I immediately contacted my father, and when my parents returned from work, my sister came clean about having done it as if she were glad of herself, saying I shouldn't have received the safe in the first place. My mother tried to side with her, but my dad chewed her up and stated he got it for me since he was sick and tired of her stealing from me. My dad has to pay me back each time she pilfers money from me and spends it since my mother never would. My dad got me a lock for my door and even a combination key lockbox with the key to my room next to the door. We had to replace the complete window from my room. After shattering my window, my sister grounded herself for a month and spent that whole time pining in her room. Mom always let Dad go back to do what she wanted, like watching TV or playing video games whenever he was home, till he left work. Knowing that my sister and mother would have gone out of their way to make me more miserable, I decided not to say anything. Once her month-long grounding ended, my sister started pestering me for money each time she spent all of her stipend. She never saved anything, hence I just pointed out to her that she would never pay it back. To be honest, I created an IOU to see whether she would really sign it before Dad. She ripped the paper in half later and went crying to Mom once more over my rudeness. Mom, she would try to make me cough up the money for her, but I would remind her what Dad would do. Thus, if my sister needed any more money, it wouldn't come for me. My mom then actively sought to send me to military school but Dad objected. Also, for anyone wondering why my dad didn't simply assist me create a savings account back then, I honestly don't know. Saving it in cash seems like the way we handled things. Update. I once made my mother walk straight into my door. My sister had thrown my safe through my bedroom window. So shortly after my dad provided me a safe for my money, he also got me a deadbolt lock for my door with a wall-mounted lockbox requiring a code to access the key. Together, we installed the lock and lockbox while my sister and mother were not home. My sister came back and initially walked past my room. I watched her glance at the lock, then dashed to get Mom coming thundering down the stairs to meet my dad, and me was both of them. What I recall is the following paraphrased. Mom says, pointing and snapping a few times, "What the hell is that?" Father, "A door lock." Mom, "I know what the exploitive thing is. Why is it in there?" Dad said, "Because you never see fit to reprimand or stop our daughter from taking from Cain or ransacking his room. The lock stays, so going forward." Mom, "This is my house, and he is just 14. His door cannot have a lock." Dad said, "No, this is our house. Last I checked, though I paid most of the expenses including the mortgage. You seldom pay anything, and I'm tired of you giving our daughter such preference that suffers constantly." Mom says, "Well then, I demand you tell me the code for the lockbox at least." Deadpan staring Dad, "I'm not doing that because you've shown I can't trust you anymore." Mom then blasted her top and rushed down the steps. My sister merely stood there pouting and then made slow walk into her room with the new lock. Things were good. It became second nature to me to lock it each time I left my bedroom. Many times when I entered the code to obtain the key, I spotted my sister and mother staring at me, but I always made sure to conceal their line of sight using my hand or body, though they hated that. There was nothing they could do about it. One day late in the month, my sister came begging me for $40 to get a video game she absolutely desired. "Why do you keep asking for money when you and I both know you'll never pay it back?" "Sis, I swear I'll pay it back." "Me, you won't. You know you would much prefer spend all of your allowance than pay me back. You spend everything you have, then some each month. That's what you do always." "Sis, no, I do not." "Well then, how about we test that?" I asked. "Always have a witness for contracts, folks." I then went into my room, acquired a piece of paper and a pen, hand-wrote an IOU contract stating Pearl would pay me back the $40 upon receiving her monthly stipend, and Dad would co-sign the IOU. After reading the paper, Pearl began sniffling. She ripped it in half, and then ran screaming to Mom once more like she did every single time her way was denied. "Mom," sis bowing sobbing. "Mom, what is it, darling small prince?" "What then did Cain do?" "Me. I asked her to sign an IOU fronting Dad as she wanted to borrow money. She then started to freckle." "Mom, and why would you pursue that? She merely sought a small loan. Would you sign the IOU also to make sure she pays the money back?" Mom says, "You little exploitive. I am not required to sign anything. Now only loan her the money. Not without a signed IOU." Mom stood up, arm out as if about to strike me, then pulled back. "Mom, you have to have a paper trail for everything. You're just like your father." I'd say it's a good thing I'm just like Dad because it's far better than being just like sis is because you never do anything good. Me, beginning to stroll up the stairs to my room at this point, Mom asked, "What was that, you little exploitive?" Just as I entered my bedroom and locked the door, she started hurrying up the stairs. Back then, my mother used to yell at me by throwing open my bedroom door. She opened the in one sweeping stroke, lunging her body forward. But at this point, I had only had the lock on my door for a brief, so she wasn't used to it yet. She tried to throw open my door and smashed rather loudly directly into the deadbolt after I shut it. Then I heard her slump to the ground and begin to produce agonizing cries. She had very hard banged her body and face against the door. Her lip was plump and her forehead developed a bump from this old-fashioned solid wood door. She was spread out on the floor, pounding her fist. When I opened the door, Mom exclaimed, "You did this to me, you little exploitive." "Me? You did it to yourself." "Mom, you are anchored. Get away from my sight." I then called Dad, and he simply grumbled over the phone over the entire matter. He stated I wasn't grounded, but I was still in huge trouble for goading her and to let him handle her when he got home. That was about it. Dad gave me a harsh lecture at the end, coupled with extra housework and a cut in my stipend that month. Every time Pearl begged for money following that day, I asked her to sign an IOU. She truly did object to that. Update 2. It blew up in her face when my mother tried to have me sent to military school and produced my dad's signature. When I stood up to my mother when she threatened to spank me, she seemed to get more cautious that if she tried to harm me, it would end very poorly for her. The final time she mainly yelled at me. She never laid a finger on me ever more until years later when she wanted my house. I gave it no thought and carried on with my regular schedule of classes and odd work right around my 15th birthday. My dad gave me an engine kit for my bike to get around town. I would be better off saving for a car than a scooter, he advised, and this would help now. I stayed saving for a car and finally agreed with his reasoning a few days later, though I came over a military academy leaflet while clearing grass off the rear patio after mowing the yard. It was on the floor under a chair close to where my mother preferred to sit and sip wine. I waited until my dad arrived home to show him what I had discovered. I felt she was planning some sort of mad scheme. He went to see my mom with the booklet and asked her about it since he was somewhat irate but didn't jump to judgments. Dad said, "Honey, what's this?" Mom becomes white upon seeing the leaflet. Nothing. I had never seen it before. Dad, exactly. You know I wouldn't let you send Kane to military school if you intended to try to send him. Mom broke her front at that and exclaimed, "He has to learn some discipline. He locks his door often. Hence I am unable to even spank him any more as he is too big. This is the only means I have left to chastise him for being a disobedient brat. Dad, Kane stood up to you for your silly favoritism and did nothing wrong given you in the way you treat her and let her get away with stealing from her brother. Our daughter is the brat if anything. And as far as I'm concerned, this conversation about sending Kane to military school is closed. Should you try to send him, then help me. I will bring the hammer down on you whatever method I can." Mom, well, I guess this entire family is just going to take away what little power I have left in this house then. Should I have nothing? I could as well be nothing. Dad, you and I both know you would much choose Keel over being nothing. Cut back on your theatrical behavior. Now a guy with his own money, Kane, is growing up. Mom left the room angrily. Then, before school the next morning, I watched her desperately attempting to fit something into the kitchen garbage can. I dug out what she was trying to hide while waiting for her to head out for work. She filled out the military school application totally in her hand. On it, both parents or legal guardians had to sign the paper, included 2 signatures. I understood Mom's, but the other seemed to be a poor attempt to copy Dad's. His sleek and sophisticated signature was something he took great satisfaction in. There is no way my mother could replicate it without seeming like fraud. She probably understood it once she was confronted and gave up attempting to send me away later. I showed my dad the papers and kept them. Though he was furious, he let it go knowing she had done it already. Still, he filed the paperwork, right in case a few more months later word leaked out that my mother was seeing an old high school ex-boyfriend. My dad filed for divorce. That was his last straw. Months later, after he acquired another house, I moved in with him, pulling out the military school records my mom had created with his signature. He accelerated the divorce rather fast, and it wasn't only that. He also had evidence she created his signature on at least 1 credit card application and one other thing I don't remember, which made Mom worry about being arrested for fraud. She agreed to most of his requirements, so they proceeded really quickly through court. Dad didn't want the house, so Mom bought it nevertheless. She also insisted on alimony and child support, since my sister predictably decided to remain living with her for a decade of monthly payments. The judge granted my mother child support, and a minimal alimony award. Alimony essentially paid my sister's allowance anyhow. Mom was really irate about that and vowed to bring him back to court, but for years he held the falsified signatures over her head to calm her. My sister threw out her mouth at me and smugly claimed Mom informed her she was a princess and the more deserved sibling, so explaining the reason I was leaving the house, not caring anymore. I merely shook my head and advised her to consider what she wants. Then I went out the door at last as free as a bird. My connection with my sister, who paid once weekly visits to Dad's residence, deteriorated until at last we stopped communicating completely for years. Mom's residence hardly appealed to me. She essentially turned my former room into a home office anyway. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.